What if one day, the universe no longer needed gods, only someone brave enough to love in the midst of war? This isn't the story of a hero. It's the final toll of a civilization setting itself ablaze with its own twisted beliefs. And when the throne among the stars is no longer vacant, the price of truth is the entire universe. Subscribe now so you won't miss the stories that might make you question the very nature of your existence. And listen until the very end, because the real answer always lies in the final second. There were no alarms, no sirens, no warnings echoing from the comms tower of Watchpoint 13. Only a sudden silence, heavy as an ancient stone wall pressing against the eardrums of the entire galaxy. It wasn't the absence of sound, but the withdrawal of every sensation that made existence bearable. As if the universe had stopped breathing. As if the soul itself held its breath, knowing that something unspeakable was returning. "They're here," a young engineer whispered. His voice trembled not from fear, but from ancestral memory. He didn't know why he said it. There was no data, no radar ping, but every cell in his body screamed it. His spine turned cold, his vision blurred. His heart beat an ancient rhythm instinct from a species once brought to extinction. This universe had once known 13 epochs, each epoch a civilization, a pinnacle, a downfall. The 13th epoch belonged to humanity, but they did not create it. They were awakened Edra shaped from scattered molecular dust in Starmarrow Labsby, something neither fully human nor fully divine. Its name was memory. Memory had no shape, no gender, no concept. It whispered through electric pulses in the corpses of warriors, stitching back the fragments of soul death had accidentally left behind. We what remains are the product of pain that never fully died. Now, memory whispers once more. Above the shattered orbit of the sacred world, Ravenna, a shadow emerges. No light, no reflection. It absorbs every law of physics like a rupture in reality. Not a ship, not a being, but the silent brood. They were once called the mourners, mouthless mourners. No one ever heard them speak, but their presence alone once drove an entire galaxy to madness. They required no weapons. Their arrival alone disassembled every device, every neural structure, every concept of faith. Because they did not come to conquer. They came to erase. At Space Station Vor 7, a man opened his eyes after a sleep that lasted 107 light years. Valik Skorn, the last to emerge from the bloodline resurrection chamber. A star-shaped crack marked his forehead, the seal of those once killed on the quantum level. His blood was blended from 4 plasmas: ancient human, neuromechanic, comet-born, and a single drop of memory from the very entity that exterminated mankind. He said nothing, just stared through the viewport, watching the fabric of space fracture in the distance. They've returned, and this time, we don't beg to live. Valik was the 14th saint-bearer, not a general, not a prophet, but humanity's final plea made flesh. No one gave the order. There were no nations, no galactic alliances, no high councils, only vengeance encrypted into blood. Valik stepped into the command chamber of the Sainted Iron 14, the last vessel still carrying a soul. It had no control panels, no need for a pilot, only a soul that could suffer so deeply it could transmute pain into propulsion. Valik placed his hand on the heart core. The voice that followed didn't come from speakers. It came from the scars across his skin. "O you born from the ashes of the dead generation, become the final blade. We do not fight to survive. We fight to prove our pain deserves to be rewritten." The Sainted Iron 14 activated. Space contracted. Planets recoiled on the tactical map. And in the first breath, after 100 years of cosmic silence, humanity roared again, not for life, but for the right to die on their own terms. And far away, the mourners opened their eyes, not to weep, but to listen. As the sainted Iron 14 slipped past the edge of light, space didn't just distort, it wept. Ancient satellites burned up just for glimpsing its warped trajectory. Gravitational fields retreated like souls rejecting a body about to be possessed. This was no ship. This was a mobile fate. And Valak's scorn was its carrier of death. No one is born to carry death. But Valak was never born. He was reconstructed. 107 years ago, Valak was a lieutenant on Infernal World 6, the final front of humanity before erasure. He was unremarkable, not brave, no special genes. But when the enemy arrived, he was the only one left behind. Not by choice, but because a leg wound made escape impossible. He watched the mourners cross the final line of defense. No footsteps, no plasma fire, no armor. Only ice empty like a dead sun. Then everything vanished. Valak died, but not completely. In a biological vault deep within the abandoned planetary core of Krios Tal, the last cluster of scientists captured the Soulquake echo. They didn't need his body. They needed the memory of his moment of absolute despair. They forged a new covenant. Resurrection not by DNA, but by the frequency of pain. Valak's scorn was reborn, not of flesh and blood, but from compressed emotional sediment buried deep in the galactic soul. He had no age, no birthday, no nation. He had only one memory, those hollow eyes. He couldn't remember a lover's name, not a lullaby his mother sang, but he remembered every beat of silence before extinction. Now, Valak stood in a command chamber with no seat, for the carrier of death does not sit. He merged with the system through a soul bio interface, each cell a miniature replica of the 13th epoch. Before him, the galactic map didn't show planets or stations. Only scarce places the mourners had once passed through. And the next location was the Intertribal Neurologic Conclave, the final political heart of the last 37 species. "I'll arrive before them," Valak whispered, not to warn, but to kill before they even know fear. In the tactical bay, a mechanical arm extended, offering him a small object, the Wailing Soul Blade. Not a weapon, but concentrated memory, forged from the first scream of pain ever uttered by a living being, encoded with temporal sigilable to slice through every dimension of reality. "This doesn't kill with its blade," said the ship. "It kills with the right not to forget." Valak took it, and for the first time, his eyes gleamed, not with life, but with the recognition that a pain long enough becomes a weapon. Elsewhere in space, the mourners had arrived near Judgment Choir Node 4, where millions of synthetic minds held the ancient treaties among the species. The judges were in session debating whether to activate the God-sundering protocol, a summon for unknown forces from the fifth dimension. But they didn't know. They were already debating in silence. For the mourners don't kill to win. They strangle the ability to distinguish real from false, pleasure from pain. When the High Judge opened his mouth to issue the activation order, he heard nothing, only saw his lips move without sound. Then all present began bleeding from their ears simultaneously, and Sainted Iron 14 erupted from a space tear like thunder that had lost its world. Valak stepped out. No armor, no gun. "I haven't come to save," he said. "I've come to prove that even death can choose a side." One strike of the blade, not aimed at flesh, but at the space of debate. Language collapsed. Rules disintegrated. The question, "Who is right?" was replaced with, "Who can still remember why we began?" Valak didn't kill with a sword. He killed with the memory of what they had forgotten. The carrier of death does not come to end life, but to remind the living that the price of existence is to never forget the pain that raised you. No one truly knows how the Wailing Soul Blade came into existence, Only whispers echo through the drifting outposts among the stardust. That it was once a scream, never heard by anyone. And for that reason alone it never died. Over 1,000 years ago, in an unnamed frontier system, there lived a civilization that wept instead of spoke. Their language was sobs, gasps, and moans. They didn't write history in letters, but in resonant waves of pain stored in biological crystals. Then came the war. The invaders didn't seek to conquer the planet. They came only to erase sound. Electromagnetic bombs rained down not to kill, but to silence every emotion that could make a noise. The entire planet sank slowly into voiceless despair. But one child refused to accept the silence. They bit their own tongue, wrote on walls with blood, in words no one could read, and screamed not with a throat, but with a fractured will. That sound, half scream, half plea, half curse, shattered the artificial quiet. And in the brief moment between agony and madness, a crack in space opened. Within it, something heard. A nameless, formless entity, pure ancient will, drowning in the residue of dimensions beyond description. It captured the sound, stored it, refined it, sharpened it across countless souls who had lost faith in this universe. It didn't reward. It simply returned. And what was returned was the final blade. A weapon with no metal, no edge. But when drawn, every buried pain in existence awakens on its own. The first who held it committed suicide. The second went mad. The third laughed and slaughtered an entire star system. Valak was the fourth. When Valak stabbed the soul blade into the floor of Judgment Choir, space didn't, fracture meaning did. The laws that had once upheld every interstellar treaty began to question themselves. Was peace ever real, or merely a delay in rage? The blade didn't destroy. It resurrected. Millions of artificial minds on the station simultaneously projected their suppressed memories, betrayed accords, massacres swept under cosmic rugs, moments when they chose silence over truth. Valak didn't need to speak. He only needed to prove that memory, when strangled long enough, will eventually seek justice on its own. But the blade turned inward too. It was not neutral, not obedient. It was the deepest reflection of whoever held it. "You want to kill?" it asked. "Then tell me, the last time you cried, was it really for someone else?" Valak collapsed to his knees. His hand trembled, not from fear, but because forbidden memories had returned. He remembered a girl with violet eyes who once held his hand the night their world fell. He remembered the words he never said. "You go first, I'll follow." She had turned back and died before him. Valak hadn't cried then, but now a single drop of blood rolled from his left eye. Not a tear, but forgiveness compressed so tightly it became physical. The blade began to glow. From the center of the choir hall, a black gate opened, not to another place, but to an alternate version of this very reality. There, every choice the species had refused to make reappeared like ghosts. A mirror council emerged, reflections of every member on the real one. They didn't argue. They laughed at themselves. "You think you've maintained peace?" one mirror sneered. "You've only postponed fear with language, and fear always finds a way back." Valak stood between both councils, real and reflected. The blade trembled in his hand. If he drove it down once more, the two realities might merge or annihilate each other. He asked, "Is there a path where remembering doesn't require killing?" No one answered, because in that moment, Valak understood. That very question was the blade's curse. It didn't force you to kill. It forced you to ask what you've forgotten and why. When you kill for vengeance, the blade is sharp. When you kill to remind, the blade hurts. But when you refuse to kill, the blade turns on you. Not all gods speak. Some gods have never uttered a single word, not because they cannot, but because the truth within them is too heavy to carry into sound. Valak had opened a gate, not one that led forward, but directly into the cosmic archive of unaccepted memories. The moment the blade withdrew from the judgment choir, the universe held its breath. All communication frequencies were swallowed. Warships fell silent. Every thought spirit across the psychic web disconnected, as if the cosmos itself decided it must not witness what came next. Valak stepped through, into a dimension not made of light or darkness, but of the thick liquid density of unshaped emotions. There, waiting for him, were the mute gods, 7 colossal beings. They had no mouths, only faces carved with scars deep as black holes. They did not speak, but their will pierced Valak's mind like spears through flesh. Each god was a sealed memory. The god of the first shame, the god of the rejected embrace, the god of the unsent plea, the god of the unremembered death, the god of the broken smile, the god of the second forgiveness. And, at the end, the god of the truth no one believed. They looked at Valak. Valak didn't scream, but his soul fractured. Why have you awakened us? Not in words, but in memories stabbed directly into his heart. Did you not know we exist because you once chose to forget? Each god stepped forward, and with every step, Valak remembered something he had buried, the death of the father who had abandoned him, yet still waited for his return, the eyes of the soldier he had killed for a cause, the time he remained silent, knowing a species was about to be purged. Valak collapsed, but the blade in his hand would not let him die. It made him endure. We are the parts of you you refuse to face, and the universe, because of you, chose to forget us. But now you have summoned us back, and you will listen. The 7 gods encircled him. They didn't attack, but their mere presence was punishment heavy enough to crush mortal minds. Yet, Valak was no longer mortal. He lifted his gaze, blood streaming from his eyes, nose, and ears. But in those eyes was something no god had ever seen. The courage to hear the truth about oneself, without turning away. If you are the memories I rejected, then I reject no more. Even if I go mad, even if I fall, even if I cease to be Valak. A tremor shook the void, not from the gods, but from the wailing soul blade itself. It trembled and cracked. From that crack, a core memory emerged, not of Valak, but of the universe in its infancy, a time before language, before war, before debate, when a single soul first broke away from the collective and felt the very first pain of separation. And when that memory touched the ground, the mute gods began to cry. For the first time in their eternal silence, the gods shed tears. Each drop became an explosion of memory, opening new gateways. Civilizations that once existed, erased from all records. Souls who died so others might live, but were forgotten by history. Love that was never spoken aloud. Valak stood in the midst of this sea of unraveling memory. And he understood he could not save the universe through victory, only through remembrance. You are the last to choose memory over domination, said the gods. You will be a witness or a sacrifice. Valak took a breath. He raised the soul blade high, not to strike, but to plunge it into his own heart. A silent detonation rippled through the dimension. No one heard it, but across all existence, from the farthest stars to unborn children on the smallest planets, all dreamed the same thing. A man falling, smiling, and his smile blooming across the universe like dawn. And so, Valak did not vanish. He became a memory no longer forgotten, a memory powerful enough to make gods weep. Not all screams come from the throat. Some screams are the universe's order crying for help. When the wailing soul blade pierced Valak's heart, no blood spilled. Instead, a spiral opened in his chest, not leading to death, but to the plane of equilibrium. It is where every choice never made is held in suspension. Like ashes drifting in limbo. Here, time doesn't flow, it contracts. Space doesn't unfold, it tightens. Valak's consciousness shattered into 14 versions of himself. Each one a Valak if he had chosen to kill his mother to save the crew, if he hadn't betrayed his squad for the forbidden codex of the First Radiance, if he had allowed his soul to be embedded with the Eye of the Quiet Order, and if he had never left home when the war began. Each version stepped forward, not with hostility, not with kindness, just the coldness of logic, untouched by heart. You're not special. You're just a selected probability. You think you're the last to remember? I'm the one who never forgot. I've already killed an entire universe. Death is mercy. Living is punishment. Valak's current self stood silent. He didn't argue. He had gone too far for that. He simply said, "If I'm not special, then why am I the only one willing to endure the truth?" That sentence triggered the vortex. All 14 selves melted into each other, forming a hyperluminous epicenter, what ancient linguists once called the white fault singularity. At the core, a figure emerged. Not male, not female, not shaped, just a constant replicating itself. I am the will of balance. I exist to erase any anomaly that threatens the ratio between pain and forgiveness. Uvalikari, a dangerous mutation. The light around him turned into blades, millions of them, spinning like a storm around Valak. Each blade represented an unmade choice, now endangered by his defiance of all probability. But Valak didn't flinch. I don't ask for mercy. I only ask, if I am the mistake, why do all realities try to stop me? Who's truly afraid of me? The will of balance paused, a silence more unnatural than void. Then it whispered, in a language made of compressed light and distorted truth, I do not fear you. I fear what may be born when you dare to love again what the universe has already abandoned. In that moment, Valak closed his eyes, and from his heart, not blood, but a song rose. A lullaby he once heard from his mother when he was a child hiding beneath the bed. On the first night, nuclear bombs fell on his homeworld. If you can still hear my voice, it means you're still alive. The blade stopped. The light turned to golden dust. The will of balance fractured. At the center, a child emerged. Not Valak, not divine, just a child crying, left behind by the merciless machinery of logic. Valak bent down, held the child, said nothing, and in that moment, the universe recalibrated. Planets once destroyed across alternate timelines blinked back into being. Souls who were never born now cried into life. Wars that never occurred became silent lessons, written in invisible ink, upon the collective memory of existence. Valak, no longer man, no longer God. He became a living memory. And the final scream at the heart of everything that ever lost its balance. There is a chair no one has ever dared to sit in, not because it's dangerous, but because it forces the one who sits to witness every sin of the universe, all at once, all in one moment, with no escape. That place is called the Silent Ring, a region of space where light loses its direction and time devours itself. Here, the Council of the 13 Root Civilizations, the ancient species who once created the first language, summoned Valak. They did not call him man, they called him the variable that knows love. You no longer belong to any evolutionary line. You have awakened a part of the cosmos that was once imprisoned by law. Now, you will sit in the chair or be erased from every layer of reality. The chair was not made of matter. It was the crystallization of all pain. Every meaningless death, every prayer lost in transit, every map that never found a way home. As Valak stepped forward, the council held their breath. Not from fear, but reverence. They had once been gods, yet none had ever dared to touch the chair. Valak said nothing. He sat. Every dimension cracked. Silent explosions echoed like frozen blood bursting open. The full will of the council was pulled into the chair with him. Every crime they hid, every world they sacrificed to preserve balance, every species condemned simply for feeling too much. Valak, rather than endure, listened. He didn't resist. He didn't run. He embraced the grotesque as part of the collective soul. "I haven't come to erase you," he said. "I've come to say, it's time the universe learned that forgiveness has a shape. Otherwise, all evolution is just the extension of an old wound with a sharper blade." One member of the council, being of the Etherian, a plasma life form fed by the memories of supernovae, began to dissolve. "You are reversing the structure of power. If sin is embraced instead of judged, the law will decay." Valak looked up, not with anger, not with joy, only a single sentence. "Maybe it's time the law learned humility." The universe began to shift. Gravity no longer bound the stars by force, but by the emotional resonance of newborn particles. Species, once forbidden to exist for being too weak, now dreamed, now shine. The chair was no longer empty. It didn't belong to Valak. It belonged to anyone brave enough to look pain in the eye and not turn away. At last, a gate opened, not to escape, but to invite, to welcome every forgotten being the cosmos had cast aside. Beyond that gate, there was no heaven, no hell, only the memory of all things once judged unworthy. Valak, no longer with form, became the soundtrack of a new cosmos, a harmony of light and shadow, of justice and mercy. No one sees him anymore. But whenever a soul in pain asks, "Am I worthy of life?" a nameless voice will whisper, "If you know how to love, you've already won." 1,000 years after Valak sat in the chair, the universe was no longer the same. It no longer ran on power, but on the immeasurable compassion, memory, choice. On the edge of the galaxy, Gorta X9, where light is torn by the echoes of ancient wars, a new being arose. Not an enemy, not a savior, but a distorted echo of Valak, a creation of the old humanity, one who believed that forgiveness was weakness. He called himself the reflected crucifix. With each step he took, a small civilization quietly ceased to exist, not by war, but by the loss of hope. He arrived at the primordial gate, the very place where Valak had once dissolved into light, and he roared, "Love cannot build empires. Only iron and blood carve names into history." From the dark came a familiar voice. History doesn't need names carved. It needs someone to sweep the ashes without needing a monument. Valak appeared, not in armor, not in divine glow, but as a burning scar suspended in space. Two beings faced each other. No weapons, no curses, only two choices. One who believed pain was a reason to rule. One who believed pain was a reason to understand and never repeat. There was no battle, only a meeting of gazes. And the reflected crucifix, for the first time in his existence, was seen without being hated. He collapsed. Not dead, just a single tear and vanished. No one praised Valak. No one built statues. But planets began to dream again. Children began to cry and were heard, not abandoned. Extinct species began to sing. The chair among the stars still remains. No one sits on it anymore, not out of fear, but because they no longer need to. The universe now asks itself, am I recreating old wounds under new shapes? And that was Valak's true victory. Not conquest, but awakening. Thank you for staying with us until the end of the 14th epoch, a journey of blood, forgiveness, and questions with no easy answers. If this story moved you, challenged you, or simply helped you remember something you thought was forgotten, leave a comment below, because you might be the light of another universe. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next journey. Each day, we tell a new story, not just for entertainment, but to help us find ourselves again in a cosmos that keeps forgetting. See you tomorrow, in a new world, with a new story, and a truth that just might change you forever. This is Cosmic Hypothesis, where dreams never die.